I can still remember the morning that changed it all. It was still dark outside, and I could hear the horses. And my boys, they were barely awake, still rubbing their sleep out of their eyes and as they pulled on their boots. And I remember standing there thinking, are we really doing this? I can remember the school bus driving by the front of our house and thinking my boys weren't going to be on it that morning. And thinking, are we actually going to teach them everything they need to know? That was nearly 30 years ago. My husband, Brian, and I had just made one of the biggest decisions of our lives to homeschool our two boys, all the way from kindergarten through high school graduation. I didn't have a teaching degree. I didn't have a perfectly organized home. There were no detailed plans at the time, just a deep conviction in my heart that I knew this was the right path for our family, and the willingness to figure it out together. That's one of the biggest things, is to be able to be okay with learning alongside your children. So today, I want to tell you our story, not the Instagram version, but the real one. The barn mornings and the rodeo weekends and the hard days and the light bulb moments, the doubts that I had along the way, and the moment that Brian and I handed our boys their diplomas on stage. We, the parents, handed our sons their high school graduation diplomas on stage. And I realized it had all been worth it. Because if you're sitting here wondering, can I actually do this? I want this video to be your answer. When Brian and I first talked seriously about homeschooling, we both had mixed emotions of excitement and fear. That's normal, absolutely normal. You're embarking on something incredibly impactful, not only for your family today, but going into the future and for generations to come, believe it or not. I wanted more freedom with our boys. I wanted more joy in their learning. I wanted that excitement, that curiosity spark to be able to take us on different pathways in any given day, and it did. I wanted more time together as a family. It was like my number one priority in my life, really. I didn't love the idea of handing them off to a system that would treat them like a number in a classroom. But I also asked myself every question you're probably asking right now. What if I'm not qualified? I didn't go to school for teaching. What if I was missing something important for them? What if my kids grow up resenting this decision that their father and I are making? Again, I had no teaching degree. I was not a trained educator. I was a mom. I was a mom who loved her kids. And I had a why, a deep convicted why, a deep reason that I kept going back to when things got hard. And here's what I know now, 20 years later, that why was the only credential that I ever actually needed, truth be told. What really qualifies you to homeschool your child is not a diploma. It's knowing your child and your children better than any teacher in a classroom will ever have time to. It's not a mark against our teachers. I'm not coming from that standpoint, but it's the truth. They're not their children. They're your children. And it's caring about their future more than anyone else in the world does. It's about the willingness to keep showing up even on those days that it's not very easy. And I also want to be honest with you about something. Before I had any professional training, my boys were already thriving at home. Love and commitment outrun credentials every single time. Our homeschool did not happen in a neat classroom with rows of desks. It unfolded in a rhythm of our family life, the kitchen table, sitting Indian style on the carpet in the middle of our living room floor, teaching them math, different patterns of math. It was so simple. Most mornings started before the sun came up. The boys would pull on their boots, still half asleep, and head out with us to feed and water the horses. They shoveled hay, they cleaned stalls, hauled water buckets. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. I wouldn't trade those mornings for anything. And here's what I want you to know. Truthfully, those chores, they were as much of an education as any math worksheet or spelling test. My boys learned responsibility, discipline, time management, and the satisfaction of seeing a job through to the end. They learned that sometimes work is hard and not very fun, and that it doesn't make it optional. That's a great life lesson, and no textbook can teach that. So on weekends, we were at rodeos. My husband and I were competing at the time, and the boys came with us every single weekend. They were around that world for a long time, every weekend. And they were meeting people of all ages. They learned to hold a real conversation with a 60-year-old cowboy as easily as a 6-year-old. And their social skills were sharpened, not in a classroom, but in horse trailers and rodeo arenas. When people asked me, and trust me, they asked, but what about socialization? I couldn't help but smile. Are you kidding me? My boys weren't isolated. They were immersed. They played community sports, competitive community sports on select teams. They played soccer, football, and basketball, and baseball, motocross, ice hockey. They did theater at the Georgetown City Old Palace Theater, which was really fun. They took piano lessons and guitar lessons and drums. They joined art classes, Bible studies, and homeschool co-ops where other parents shared their skills. Our home became a gathering place. Monthly pool parties with 50 some odd homeschool kids splashing around and laughing every summer, fall festivals, community events. The question was never whether my kids were socialized. The question was when they were going to stop and rest and give us some rest too, to be frank. Homeschooling didn't shrink my children's world. It stretched it wider than I ever imagined. And the boys, as they got older, our homeschool shifted and it will for years too. That's normal because we evolve through this journey. The early years, they're cozy and flexible and reading aloud on the couch, counting beans on the kitchen floor or the living room floor, turning a walk around the property into a science lesson. And then the middle years brought more structure, more independence, which I think is another important aspect to homeschooling, that the kids really do become more independent in their learning and education and mastery. My boys they started taking ownership of their own learning in ways that I hadn't expected. One was diving deep into maps and history timelines. He could lose himself for hours in the atlas. And the other was kinesthetic through and through. Put tools in his hands or let him build something, and suddenly he was fully engaged. Long sit-down lessons made him restless. But measuring cups in the kitchen, teaching fractions, he was all in. Cooking was wonderful. That's the homeschool advantage nobody talks about enough. You get to teach to your whole child who they actually are and not to a classroom average. Those middle years also meant I had to get honest about myself. There were days that did not go according to plan. Days when someone woke up cranky, could have been me, or the washing machine broke, or the dishwasher broke, or a horse became ill, or we spent a whole morning waiting for a farrier. That was real. Days when I scrapped the formal lesson entirely and we did just life together. And you know what? Those were often the most meaningful days, the most insightful and days of growth. My boys learned patience and adaptability and how to pitch in when life got hard. That's not a disruption to their education. That is real education. So I also want to say this. We built community on purpose. It started small, one play date that turned into a history lesson. Then we joined a co-op where parents took turns teaching. Eventually, our home became the gathering spot. And that community, that village of families doing this together, was the glue that held us steady on the hardest days. You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to wait for community to find you. You can build it. So I want to talk to you for just a minute. We're going to pivot just a little bit. We kind of covered the middle years. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about high school, because this is where I hear the most fear from families who are considering homeschooling. Will they fall behind? How do I do transcripts? Will colleges even look at them? Those are all very legitimate questions and important questions, and I have answers for you. And here's what I can tell you from experience. My boys got into college. I never had an institution question the transcripts that came from me. They were notarized just like the building down the road, it would send them. Same difference. They weren't handwritten. I did them on a computer. They were legible and they were very professional looking. And then I sealed them just like I was required to, like everybody's required to. And before I sealed them, they were notarized. And not just because they check a box. Okay. Colleges actively seek out homeschoolers because they tend to be self-motivated. They're independent learners who know how to manage their time and take initiative. That is exactly the kind of student a university wants. The high school years became about preparing them for life beyond home, study skills, strong writing, critical thinking, real world opportunities, jobs, apprenticeships, and dual enrollment college courses. Yes, and beyond what their peers in public school were enabled to take. They were able to do more in the dual credit sector. After they were counseled and met with a counselor and that they passed extra testing, they were allowed. They were excused and allowed to do more before they've even graduated high school. My boys graduated not just ready to get into a college, quote unquote, but they were ready to thrive. And they did and are. And then came graduation day. I will never forget that moment that Brian and I handed our boys their high school diplomas on stage. It wasn't just about coursework. It was about the journey we had all walked together as a family. The barn mornings and the rodeo weekends and the hard days and the light bulb moments and every read aloud on the couch and every messy experiment in the backyard and in my kitchen, and all of it woven into who they became. That moment, I would choose it 1,000 times over. I share all of this with you because I know what it feels like to be right there in that beginning moment, staring at a blank calendar, wondering where in the world to start, not sure if you have what it takes. I want to be the person I wish that I had been back then, someone who had walked this road and could say, here is what the path actually looks like. Here is what to expect. Here is how to do this. And that's why I wrote the Homeschool Roadmap. It is a step-by-step guide for parents who are just beginning or who are in the middle of it and need to find their footing a little bit. looking for new perspectives. It covers everything from discovering your child's learning style to homeschooling on a budget, teaching multiple ages all at once, the skill in doing so, to planning your first year, to high school and college prep. 18 chapters. Every question I was asked in the 20 years of homeschooling, answered. It launches on Amazon on March 24th, next Tuesday. The link is in the description below. If you grab a copy, I genuinely believe it will save you months of confusion and hundreds of hours of guesswork. It is the book I wish I'd had on day one. So if there is one thing I want you to leave this video knowing, it's this. You are more qualified than you think you are. You don't need a teaching degree. You don't need a perfect home or a bottomless budget or all the answers figured out before you even begin. You just need your why. A reason that's bigger than the fear and the willingness to take the first step. The fact that you're watching this video means you already have both. So I'll see you at the next video. Have a good one. Thanks for watching.